What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Week 1 edition of NFL Live here at FTNDaily.com. My name is Zach Graham, aka Kawaisenberg DFS, going to be your host on Fridays this wonderful NFL season that kicked off last night. With me, my co-hosts. First, Adam Pfeiffer, decked out in his Bills gear. I think he's the internet's favorite Bills fan. Probably, I think maybe a little under the weather, he told us before we went live. But Adam, you got to be feeling pretty good about your team and how they performed last night.
Yeah, I'm flat out sick. It's not just under the weather, but what didn't help probably was screaming in joy many times yesterday.
Yeah.
And I talked to David yesterday. I don't know how it happens. Every year leading up to week 1, I get sick. So it's just tradition, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I'm feeling good. The Bills are the best team in the league, and they have the best quarterback in the NFL.
I mean, it's got to be partially because of how hard you've been working the last couple of weeks leading up to week 1 here. If you haven't yet, if you've got access to that game-by-game breakdown that Adam wrote, that's on the FTN Fantasy side of the network. But I don't know how many thousands of words you said that ended up at, Adam, but I know blood, sweat, and tears went into that. So also along with us this week, kicking off the NFL season, he will dust you on the golf course just as often as he will on the DFS leaderboards. It's Alex Blickel, one of the sharpest minds that I've met in the industry. Alex, how you doing this week? Eagles taking on the Lions this week. I think some hype behind your team as well.
Yeah, really excited for week 1. Super excited to be on with the two of you. What a great team we have for this first show. The only thing is, Adam, we're going to have to work really hard to make sure that Zach doesn't throw in a San Antonio Spurs discussion at some point. We only have an hour to get through.
I mean, that's the other thing too. We can get into it, but for anybody that doesn't know, I'm all over the place. I'm a Cavs fan, so my teams are just on the up and up right now.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody who's tuned in doesn't know me, you can tell, I think, from the one of the jerseys behind me what my NFL team is, and luckily we shouldn't have to discuss them too much this season because my team.
Oh, we're going to talk about them today.
Ultimately, my team's Spurs, Steelers, right? Texas Rangers, we haven't talked about for almost a decade. Austin FC, though, on the up and up. We'll leave the MLS for another time. Guys, obviously a lot to get to in this hour, and we'll get to these Sunday games in a minute, but just 2-3 minutes. Alex, I guess I'll start with you because I know we're just going to get more Bills rah-rah propaganda from Adam. Your takeaways from the game last night, 10-10 at halftime, and then looking back once the final horn sounded, it really just felt one-sided.
I really only have one major takeaway, and just to relate it to the conversation we're going to have here about the full main slate this week is if your coach is going to be that stubborn with first down runs when it's not working and when it's so obvious in what you have to do on second down and that's not working, your stack is just going to be dust. You can't survive in the NFL just being that awful on first downs. And I do think there's an interesting conversation when it comes to that, which is, I think so many times when we criticize coaches for that type of play calling, that type of first down, specifically play calling, we call it dumb or stupid. And I'm wondering if it's more arrogance in the sense that they feel like they're so sharp on second and third down and they're so clever at setting things up for second and third down that they can just treat first down as a throwaway down. And obviously it doesn't work. And it even then makes you more predictable. Kevin had a phenomenal breakdown on Cliff Kingsbury, fake sharp there, and how not only is it so bad for you on first down, but then it sets you up to be super predictable on second down, where the Cardinals have this massive pass rate on second down. So everyone knows what you're then going to do, not just on first, but also on second. And I think we saw a lot of the same with McVay yesterday and really just sunk his offense in that regard.
Yeah, no question. I mean, Adam, kind of night and day from your week 1 experience last year. That was maybe the high point of my Steelers season was taking down the Bills last year, but we know that week 1 doesn't make the season. The Bills were extremely good last year, obviously going out in spectacular fashion against the Kansas City Chiefs in that kind of legendary playoff game. Now, with the better week 1 performance this year against the defending Super Bowl champions, I guess I think I know it's coming, but is this Bills team? Is this their year? Are they going all the way?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's when you have the ability to generate pressure and get 6, 7 sacks without blitzing one snap and have the secondary they have and get Trey White back, like, it's on top of what we already know from the offense. Yeah, like, I'm a pessimist by heart, so, like, I'm not going to sit here and say they're definitely going to Super Bowl, but, like, there's a reason they were the favorites all offseason. And, after some turnovers in the first half, the second half, they clearly showed. And, like, anybody that thought Von Miller was washed after they signed him, just you can hold that one because, geez,
Yeah, I mean,
the difference he's going to make alone is insane.
Yeah, and he made, multiple big-time names showing up for their first game there. I thought Bobby Wagner was pretty good on the other side of the ball, but obviously Von Miller making an impact. Adam, my 53-man dynasty league that I commissioned. I was going up against Von last night, so I didn't really like seeing that in terms of my fantasy outlook, but certainly looking good for your team. Some housekeeping before we get into the Sunday slate. This Friday stream, free today, for all of you wonderful people to consume, but we will be going behind the paywall with the rest of the FTN live streams for the season, starting week 2. So if you like what you see today, right, we can hook you in. You can join with a 20% off discount using the promo code FTNTV. That gets you 20% off any package here at the FTN Network. So again, you like what you see here, maybe you have a good week 1, you come get behind the paywall. If you already know you want to sign up, you take in this free stream and you want that paywall content leading up to Sunday, we're going to have Two Gun. Who else is on that Sunday stream, fellas? I think Sam is there,
and
Vlad, who I was streaming with last year, and those guys, especially Two Gun. I mean, I know that his Roto Tracker, right, was kind of making the rounds on Twitter a few weeks ago, and that's in the millions of dollars in profit for our boy Two Gun. So, again, we have a fantastic team here at the FTN Network, and we're looking forward to build on an already strong 2 NFL seasons in the books for us here. Jumping into the slate, we're going to focus mostly here, again, on the DFS side, DraftKings and FanDuel, those main slates on Sunday. If you've got any questions in the chat relating to any other sites, right, if you're playing a Yahoo or a Super Draft, something like that, feel free to fire away and we can take a look, but we'll dive in here, maybe a little bit of a unique way to approach this slate. But we were discussing this morning, fellas, like first from a wide perspective on this week 1 slate, particularly on DraftKings, I think that the pricing is very advantageous, and I think leads to some really balanced builds, at least when I was tinkering around throughout this week. So I think let's start with running backs, because I think we can have a conversation, obviously, about our stacks with QBs and wide receivers. We can get to that, and I think we have a conversation maybe on, is this even a week where we might shy away from a stack in some of our lineups? We'll get to that, but looking at running back, again, very soft pricing, I think, to put it nicely here on DraftKings this week. Only 4 of these running backs up in that kind of top elite tier are priced above $8K. Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, and Austin Eckler. Let's include, I guess, kind of some of those other 7K guys in here. And Alex, I'll go to you first. If you're looking to spend up at running back this week, obviously we've got some guys who have had interesting situations throughout the offseason, whether it's, Alvin Kamara, right? Derrick Henry coming back from that injury. Obviously, he returned late last season. If you're spending up on a running back this week, are any of these guys really catching your eye?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say about running backs is, I now have a very specific philosophy with running backs. If anyone recalls, I wrote an article last year on predicting NFL DFS performance with rostership and price based on different positions, and really found that rostership was the least predictive of actual performance for running backs than any other position. And that was especially true for expensive running backs. Like whether you were looking at an $8,000 running back who was going to be 25% owned or one that was going to be 5% owned, that ownership difference was not predictive of any difference in performance at all, which was very surprising and very different than the case was for wide receivers and even tight ends. And so I always want to get different at running back, especially up in this top price range. So the 2 catching my eye over $7,000 are Austin Eckler and Alvin Kamara, both projected for just under 10% in single entry ownership as of my last run. And maybe that'll change. I do feel like Kamara has been getting a little bit of steam throughout the day, but I'm fairly confident that Eckler will end up between like 5 and 8% So I really like him. I also like that game a ton. So you can get some either mini stacks or full stacks, as we'll talk about with Eckler as the bring back if you like the Las Vegas side. Just get a little bit more contrarian, whatever. So I really like those two guys, but my top running back is just under that $7,000 number at Aaron Jones. Adam and I were discussing him in the chat a little while ago. I just love the fact that projected at or below 10%, I feel like he has so many different paths to success, whether it's this massive role in the receiving game or the high value touches in the red zone leading to touchdowns. I just feel like he's going to be such a big part of this offense. The opportunity will be there. And again, different paths to success because he can do it on the ground with touchdowns, through the air with touchdowns, or he can just do it with this like Alvin Kamara with Drew Brees type of receiving role where he's stacking up the receptions and he's not just getting like the 5 to 10 yard receptions, but he's also running really valuable routes down the field that can turn into chunk gains. So I think $6,700 Aaron Jones is probably going to be a building block for my lineup this week.
Adam, are you kind of in that same realm where like those expensive guys are nice, but I mean, 6,700 for Aaron Jones. There's DeAndre Swift there. My guy Najee Harris down at 6'4". Like, are you with Alex kind of looking in that Aaron Jones range? Again, free show. We'll give a couple free nuggets here. Our ownership projections at FTN Daily. Running back ownership here on DraftKings. McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, the 3 highest projected owned running backs on DraftKings. So, I mean, with that knowledge, are you looking at Aaron Jones? Is that a building block for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough not to like him. Like, you look at the last 3 seasons for Green Bay, running backs have handled 19% of their targets, and that's with Devontae Adams on the team. So now we know Adams isn't there. Allen Lazard is listed as doubtful, so he's probably not going to play. And then you have a bunch of question marks at receiver elsewhere. Robert Tunyon's expected to play but be limited. And, yeah, we know the splits for Aaron Jones, averaging 6 targets, 4.5 receptions, and nearly 50 receiving yards per game in 8 contests without Adams since 2018 on DraftKings. Yeah, like this, and it's going to happen with week 1 a lot where it's like there's players priced where that's just, you're probably not going to see them priced at that point again. Aaron Jones probably falls into that same mold. And then I really like Joe Mixon because, first of all, the matchup's really good. Like, Pittsburgh has this reputation of being an elite run defense, and they have been prior to last season, but they were just terrible last season. Like, absolutely awful. Mixon in 2 games against the Steelers just absolutely ripped them apart. And I think a lot of people, because the Bengals passing game is really underpriced between Chase, Burrow, and T. Higgins, I think a lot of people will go to the passing game from Cincinnati, and that's fine. Like I totally get it, especially we know the upside they have in terms of stackability, and Burrow has 350 and 3 upside, and we've seen Jamar Chase's upside. But like for me, I like going to Joe Mixon because yes, the role in the passing game has been very inconsistent. At least it was last season. But he's a home favorite, and like we've seen Mixon as in 2 games where he's been favored against the Steelers team last season. Like I said, he just absolutely smashed. He went for 18 for 90 and 0 touchdowns in week the first time they played, which was whatever. But then 28 for 165 and 2 in their second meeting. And this Steelers team, like last year, only the Texans missed more tackles. 13% of the carries against the Steelers went for 10 or more yards, the 4th highest rate in the NFL. Like, it's a really good spot for Mixon, and I think he's being a little bit overlooked because he's kind of priced awkwardly in between Aaron Jones and some of the higher-end running backs, and because the Cincinnati passing game is really underpriced.
And I guess I'm glad, and it also hurts that you brought up Joe Mixon, because that was kind of the one guy that stood out to me in that range, because I remember very vividly what he did to my favorite team last year, and like you said, that Pittsburgh defense has a lot of big names on it, but they were awful against the run last year. And Joe Mixon was a big part of why those stats looked so horrid. Kind of dropping down a little bit price-wise here on DraftKings. Alex, I'll toss it back to you. I know Saquon Barkley obviously picking up a lot of ownership in the ownership projections. 6-1, now a full year of play removed from the catastrophic lower body injury. I guess, is that some ownership? Like, is that chalk that you would be okay eating, or would you maybe look to some of these mid 5K guys, Antonio Gibson against Jacksonville with no Brian Robinson, guys like that? How are you breaking down the mid-range here?
I think the biggest thing here is in single entries, I have him projected at 28%. So we're talking like a Big difference from the MME ownership to single entry ownership for Saquon.
Right.
And it makes him a total fade for me. I want no part of 28%. Anyone on the Giants, remotely chalky,
Yeah.
I think we'll be fading all season long. Especially like they're still an underdog. Tennessee is still a quality team. So I have no interest there. I think if I'm in this range, one of the other kind of ownership inefficiencies that stands out to me is Antonio Gibson's looking around 14%. So potential chalk. I would much rather flip that build and go to Travis Etienne. I know Kyle has him projected quite well. I feel like, we've sort of seen now, whether it's Cam Akers or elsewhere, Achilles injuries, just you don't really come back from that well. And so I think Etienne is going to have a larger share of the opportunity, especially early in the season, maybe as Robinson tries to get back. And even if they intend to use Robinson in a pretty even split, there's a really good chance that just the quality of play from Etienne immediately like forces their hand and makes them play him a little bit more. So I like Etienne's value. I also like Chase Edmonds' value a little bit.
Yes.
But ultimately, I kind of feel like I'm just going to end up paying up twice.
So before we get into Chase Edmonds, because I know Adam wants to touch on the Dolphins' new running back. A lot of injury updates, of course, coming in all day. But since we started, first of all, Chase Edmonds, that groin that was bothering him this week, not listed on the injury report. Neither is his teammate Jalen Waddle. The Cowboys ruled out Michael Gallup for week 1. Tyler Smith will start at left tackle for the Cowboys. So A. Smith will start. Just the wrong first name there. Isaiah Spiller, not listed on the injury report for the Chargers. Same thing with Darren Waller, that hamstring. He's off the injury report. And then Jacoby Myers and then Ty Montgomery, questionable for the Pats. So clean bill of health, it seems, for Chase Edmonds. Adam, talk to me about the Dolphins running back.
Yeah, so like there's still some uncertainty of whether he's going to get the goal line work or not. But like you look at Chase Edmonds in 11 games over the past 2 seasons where he's seen at least 12 touches, he's averaging 14.5 PPR points per game. And like there's upside for him getting like 16, 17, 18 touches because we just don't know. Like Sony Michel's not there anymore. Edmonds was like the first player signed in free agency. So Miami clearly was interested in him all along. And this running scheme is just so good for fantasy. We've seen it in San Francisco for years. And like you look at the matchup, looking at some of the advanced numbers we have at FTN Fantasy, like rushing production by direction. New England, first of all, they allowed the most yards after contact per carry last season, which was almost 2.9. So they were already a defense you could run on. They also allowed 8.6 yards per rush on runs to the left end, which is where the Dolphins are going to run a lot of the runs because it's an outside zone running scheme. And Edmonds has been very productive in that scheme when he's played in it throughout his career in limited sample sizes. So at 5,200, like I think he's going to get 15 to 17 touches. He's going to get the passing down work. I don't think there's a question about that. And if he does get some goal line work, then that's just adding on to everything I already like about him, given the price as well. So, like, there's been a lot of talk about Dameon Pierce, obviously, and I talked about it in Discord. Like, if this were a week 4 or a week 3 slate where like the pricing wasn't so soft because it always is in week 1, yeah, Dameon Pierce would probably be a chalk and a lot more appealing. But on this slate, like, I probably won't even I'm not even going to get to Dameon Pierce. I'll just play Chase Edmonds at 5,200. I'll play, Alex mentioned he likes Etienne, and like I don't even hate Elijah Mitchell, even though he doesn't catch a lot of passes. Yep. Like Edmonds is a guy I really like if I'm not going all the way up to the 7, to the mid 6 or higher range at running back. But there's no way I go lower than Edmonds though. Like I just don't think you have to on this slate.
I love the receiving role for him, and we can even recall some really big receiving games from Myles Gaskin with Tua. And now you get a much better receiver in Edmonds. And I also love, just from a theoretical standpoint, with the speed on the outside for Miami, running down the field, whether it's Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, whatever, there should be a ton of room underneath, over the middle, for Edmonds to work after the catch. So I think he has a really big ceiling from that receiving role.
So I know you guys, obviously, a ton of options in that price range. You guys kind of brought up Elijah Mitchell. I think A.J. Dillon right there, too, is also in play. Alongside Aaron Jones. I don't think I'm pairing them in a lineup, but if I'm running an MME build out there, I would certainly have some shares of AJ Dillon, especially Alan Lazard, I believe, listed doubtful now. So Aaron Rodgers down another one of his favorite targets, or I guess would be favorite targets this year, obviously with Devontae Adams out of town, looking kind of 5K and below here, right? Like everybody knows that Dameon Pierce is going to be popular down there at 4.8. Adam, I want to go to you first. Are there any pure punts down here, 5K and below, that you're targeting, whether it's single entry, 3 max, MME build? What sticks out to you down here, if anything? I think maybe this week, kind of like we didn't really prioritize spending up on anybody at the position. I don't know personally if I would have many options down here.
The only one that I would have considered was Kenneth Gainwell had Miles Sanders not been back, but he's been full in practice, so he's good to go. So, yeah, like Dameon Pierce would be the only player in that range. And again, I just don't think you have to get there. Like, yes, Shaquille Leonard's out for the Colts. He missed 1 game last year, and Edmonds had like 26 fantasy points, but that came off 8 receptions, I believe. Like, we're not going to see that workload in the passing game from Dameon Pierce. He's an underdog, and Rex Burkhead's still playing on passing down. So, like I said, if this is a week 3 slate where pricing was a lot tighter, Pierce would make a lot of sense, but you just don't even have to go there on this slate. You can play whoever you want. You don't have to get to Dameon Pierce.
Yeah, Josh asking about Dameon Pierce here as well. He's only projected for 5% ownership in our model. Alex, would you get to a little bit more Dameon Pierce than Adam, or are you kind of in lockstep with him there?
I'm in lockstep with him there. And I would also say I'm also a little bit interested in Gainwell. I'm still interested, though, even with Sanders looking full. I think an important point that I've been making a lot in the offseason about Sanders is everyone's pointing to the fact that he didn't score at all last season as something that will regress. And like he was super unlucky. But while I'm sure that there was bad luck involved, I also think it's true that he just isn't that good in that role, and he's not favored in that role. And Sirianni wants to throw a little bit more, I think, and he wants to have the option of throwing in the red zone. And so it makes sense to just have Gainwell on the field. This offensive line is so phenomenal that if you spread defenses out and just have them blocking and force them to defend the pass first, Gainwell's going to have room to run. So I think he might have a better role than people are expecting. But I'd also agree with Adam here in the sense that, like, even if you're right about that, even if you do quote unquote hit on Gainwell and he gives you, let's say, 15 DraftKings points here in week 1, there are enough guys underpriced who have so much upside at this running back position that might not be good enough. So I don't think I'll get there, even though I think it's a solid play in a vacuum.
I like the take, boys. And it's not always great if we're all on the same page, right? Sometimes it's good to have a little dissension in the ranks, but I think certainly at the cheap punt range for running backs, all of us kind of the same mind here heading into week 1. Let's kind of jump into quarterbacks here. And before we get to specific players, Alex, I wanted to toss it to you because us 3 were discussing this morning about QB stacks and are we really going to go there this week when maybe we can have a higher ceiling, just kind of rostering some of these guys that are really underpriced who all have a high ceiling. So talk to me about your thinking in terms of stacking here in week 1.
I am always a major proponent of stacking kind of as much as possible. Especially in single entries, I don't always stop at a double stack with a bring back. Sometimes I'll use 2 bring backs. Sometimes I'll go with a triple stack, depending on how cheap the receiving options are. But yeah, this is a week where maybe we don't need to stack as much as usual. I think the biggest thing that it's going to come down to for me is, number 1, which stacks do I like and how do they shape up? Because, for example, like one of the teams I'm considering single stacking is Arizona. Rondale Moore was just ruled out, so Marquise Brown might become mega chalk. And you have the rushing upside of Kyler Murray. So if you're using Kyler and Marquise Brown, you have the big playability through the air. You have the upside of Kyler's legs. You don't necessarily need anybody else with that stack. And you can actually make it like a still 3 skill guy plus a quarterback game stack by bringing it back with 2 Chiefs. And you just hope that maybe it's Juju and Kelsey, and you hope they rack up receptions. And then it's Kyler just beating Mahomes, whether it's more touchdowns, more rushing yards, whatever the case may be. So you can do things like that. There's also a quarterback that we're going to get to that I like a lot, who's cheaper and maybe doesn't have the pass volume or passing ceiling to support 2 guys. So maybe I only want to play one with him. But I'd also recall that same piece from last year, the predicting NFL DFS performance piece, where I found mid-tier wide receiver chalk is the best chalk there is in NFL DFS. Almost no competition there. So now, we already have Michael Pittman at $5,500, who's going to be mega chalk. I have him at 44% in single entries. We might get Marquise Brown now with no more at something like over 30%. So if you just want to start with those two guys, okay, I'm good with that. And that maybe only leaves two skill guys for a stack remaining. So I'm okay without the full stack this week. But again, it just depends on the overall build and who exactly you want to stack. I think there are certain teams, like if you're using Mahomes at quarterback, for example, I would absolutely double stack him, and I would absolutely use a full bring back there. So again, it just depends on the overall roster construction, but I will be a little bit less sort of like stingent about getting that double stack this week.
Sure. And you mentioned the Arizona injury report coming out. Rondale Moore ruled out for week 1. Zach Ertz, too, now listed questionable with that calf injury. We'll get to tight ends. I don't think we need to talk about Max Williams or Trey McBride just yet, but certainly something to keep an eye on if you're looking to stack up those Cardinals defensive side of the ball. J.J. Watt also questionable. Looking at the wide receiver ownerships, Alex, you said you had like 40+% there on Rondale Moore in single entries. He is projected in the last update here, which was about 90 minutes ago here at FTN Daily. He was our top projected receiver in terms of ownership. So obviously on the next update, there's going to be some pretty big shifts, I think, at the top of wide receiver. Adam, kicking it to you, sticking at quarterback here. Alex mentioned Kyler. Obviously, you've got Lamar back healthy, who, when Lamar Jackson was healthy last year, the Ravens were pretty darn good. Justin Herbert, obviously, up there too, price-wise, and Mahomes up top at 7-7. So who's catching your eye if you're spending up on a quarterback in week 1?
Yeah, I absolutely love Mahomes here. It is like an incredible matchup for him. You look at the way the Cardinals play defense. Under Vance Joseph, they blitzed at a top 5 rate pretty much every season he's been the defensive coordinator there. And Patrick Mahomes is like most teams pretty much stop blitzing Patrick Mahomes because it's just not wise. Like he absolutely destroys blitz defense. And you look at the numbers I wrote about in my game by game article you mentioned, but like against the blitz last season, Mahomes had a 74% completion rate, highest in the NFL, second in yards per attempt at 10.4. These teams last met in 2018, so it's a long time ago, but it was the same defensive coordinator for the Cardinals. The Cardinals blitzed Mahomes on 11 of 35 dropbacks, so about 31%. So it's not like they just didn't blitz him. Again, that was a long time ago. That was right before Mahomes ascended into being what he is today. So I'm very interested to see how much they blitz, but they also don't play a lot of too high safety, which is what teams did against Mahomes last season, wherein he had that stretch where he struggled a little bit. Mm-hmm. So if they're not going to play too high safeties, and again, my question has been how often a team's going to do it against the Chiefs this year with Tyreek Hill gone. If they're not going to do that against Mahomes and they're going to blitz him, I just want to play Mahomes and stack him with MVS, especially because the Cardinals, I think they give up the most deep receiving touchdowns in the NFL last season. So Mahomes, MVS stacks, like it's just probably my favorite way to start lineups. So I think Mahomes is in like a perfect spot. And again, like we talked about it, pricing wise, like even Travis Kelce is underpriced. So it's like the Chiefs stack is so easy to fit in the lineups, whether you go Kelce, Juju, or MVS.
Yeah, I mean, just again, to put the pricing in context this week, if anybody has previous experience on DraftKings throughout an NFL season, there's only 5 players total on the entire week 1 slate that are priced above $8K. So just so many different ways to go this week to kick off the season. Alex, you kind of teased a cheaper quarterback that you had your eye on. Who are you talking about here? Enlighten us.
Yeah, so there are actually 2. I think one point I want to make is I also love Mahomes. I also love Kyler. I really like Lamar Jackson and Herbert as well. So my take is sort of like if you're picking any of those guys, you're picking someone who's competing with crazy upside from really similarly priced players. So I sort of like the idea just from a roster construction standpoint of going down, getting away from that competition, saving a little bit of money, going to someone like Derek Carr is the first one at $5,900. You can turn this into a fairly cheap stack with Darren Waller, who's one of my favorite plays on the slate, and Hunter Renfrow, excluding Devontae Adams if you want to do that, you could also make it more expensive overall with Adams and Waller, something like that.
J.C. Jackson, by the way, just got ruled doubtful. So
Yeah.
that helps too.
Absolutely helps. And I almost think it helps like Waller and Renfro even more, because now they can't just say, okay, we're going to throw one guy at Adams and defend everybody else the way we want. Now they really have to put an overall schematic focus on Adams, which maybe opens things up a little bit more for Renfro and Waller. But then I mentioned Eckler earlier. So you're bringing it back with a really nice contrarian spend up running back. So I like the structure of that build quite a bit. And then the other one is a little bit more off the rails. It's Mitch Trubisky and the Steelers. I feel like Trubisky actually projects very well. The most difficult part about this is which wide receiver or wide receivers do you pair him with? Because that's where it gets a little bit iffy. Like I have trouble seeing Deontay Johnson being a really.
Can you pair him with Bengals defensive backs? Can you do that?
Yeah.
Can you stack him with Chidobe Awuzie?
Or D linemen, because they're going to be in his face all day.
Yeah, I'll say this though. Like I do feel very confident about Chase Claypool's overall outlook throughout the season. I feel like moving to the slot is going to be really beneficial for him. So maybe it's a skinny stack with just him. And I certainly recall Trubisky's days, like in 2018 when he made the Pro Bowl. He had good passing numbers, but he was also a genuine threat with his legs. If he's able to do that sort of thing again, he becomes a much more valuable fantasy piece than a real life quarterback, which great. You know, if I almost love targeting that type of player, because everyone thinks, oh, this guy sucks, I want no part of that, even if he's actually somewhat valuable from a DFS perspective. And the other thing there is I absolutely love Jamar Chase. Adam made some really nice points on Joe Mixon. I actually think in single entries, Mixon's going to be the most popular Bengal. And I have Higgins slightly ahead of Chase. I wouldn't be surprised if any of that like completely reverses and it ends up Chase, Mixon, Higgins, or Chase, Higgins, Mixon. All of those, you know, they're all close. But man, I love the upside of Chase. I also love the fact that, you know, I really like targeting big play receivers in stacks, because a gigantic play, a home run, whether it's like a 60-yard touchdown, whatever, it adds a possession to the game because it's just a quick strike. The opponent gets the ball right away. So I like that idea. And maybe Trubisky and these Steelers just get there on volume alone. We made the point earlier in the show. Like, I don't want my quarterback just handing the ball off repeatedly on first down over and over and over again. Even with Ben Roethlisberger being as terrible as he was last year, Pittsburgh was pretty high in the pass. They ran a bunch of no huddle when they were trailing. That no huddle rate and pass rate both went into the top 5. So I feel like they're going to be a similar team.
Their offense is going to be way more fantasy relevant because Matt Canada wants to play fast. He wants to use jet sweeps. He wants to spread defenses out, and he wants to go more under center. And those are all things Roethlisberger just didn't want to do. And it was his last year, so they were not going to just say, you know what, you know, like this is going to be Matt Canada's offense now. And I do agree, like between you look back at his offenses, he's always had a quarterback that's had some mobility, and he's always had a ton of jet sweeps and all that kind of pre-snap motion. So like those little touch passes to Claypool's going to have like 3 touchdowns this year where he gets a touch pass, a little pop pass from 3 yards out. And it's not pretty, but that's 6 points from Mitchell Trubisky. So
I'm glad you guys aren't heavy on what my play would be if I'm going to pick one Steeler. It would actually be a tight end, Pat Freiermuth. The Bengals gave it up real nice to the tight end last year. I believe 4th most receptions given up to the tight end position. And the Muth scored in both games, both meetings with the Bengals last year. And we know that he's a pretty prolific red zone threat for being such a young guy. So that would be my, if I was going to pick one of my favorite team's players, it would be the Muth. Adam, kind of these cheaper quarterbacks, does anybody stand out that either we've talked about and you kind of want to second, or anybody that we haven't mentioned that you think might be sneaky?
Yeah, and real quick, like Alex mentioned with Trubisky, like he is averaging nearly 22 rushing yards per game in 50 starts, I believe it is. So it definitely adds up. I have interest in Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, his rookie season was a complete disaster. He didn't play well, but the situation obviously wasn't great either. You look at this offense now, what Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne did in college at Clemson was a ton of RPOs. You look at what Doug Peterson did in his time as the head coach in Philadelphia, a ton of RPOs. So that's going to help Trevor Lawrence a lot, who, by the way, Trevor Lawrence last season, he had over a 73% completion rate and 8.7 yards per attempt when the Jacksonville Jaguars did run RPO last season, compared to 58% and a 5.8 yards per attempt on non-RPO passes. So I think he'll be more efficient. The offensive line's better. The weapons are better. When you add Christian Kirk, you get ETN and you get Evan Ingram. And Washington was a massive pass funnel defense last season. Last year, 71% of the yardage against Washington came via the pass. It was the fifth highest rate in the league. 67% of the touchdowns came via the pass. That was also the fifth highest rate in the league. Washington allowed the most fantasy points and rushing yards per game to quarterbacks. And Trevor Lawrence averaged 4.5 rushing attempts per game too last year, very quietly. So, they struggled to defend the deep ball. I think Marvin Jones could get behind them. Christian Kirk in the slot can still get down the field. So I actually have a lot of interest in Trevor Lawrence, pairing him with Christian Kirk and running it back with either Terry McLaurin, because Jacksonville on the other end also struggles to defend deep passes, or Jahan Dotson, who's very cheap, should be, borderline full-time player for Washington right out of the gate. So if it's not Trevor Lawrence, maybe Jameis Winston, just because he played well before he got hurt last season. The overall weapons are strong in New Orleans, but I'm very interested in Trevor Lawrence overall this season to see what he does with Doug Peterson, but I do like the week 1 matchup as well.
I'm right there with you on Lawrence. I think it's hard to hold all the bad things that happened to him and to the Jaguars as a team last season against Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if he was really set up for all that much success in his rookie year. Before we kind of move into wide receivers and talk maybe any stacks we missed or just kind of some one-off plays, Josh was asking, or I guess telling us, he's feeling that Miami stack. Tua, Tyreek Waddle. Tua's got new weapons, all the speed in the world. Alex, how do you feel about a little Dolphins stack here in week 1? Take it on the Pats. The Pats are always going to have some kind of scheme that Belichick's going to throw at the opponent. How do you feel about the Dolphins?
I'm good with it. I would make one change to it, though. I would choose between Hill and Waddle and use Chase Edmonds in the stack. It frees up a wide receiver spot. It makes the stack as a whole a little bit cheaper. And I really think that, those two guys, Waddle and Hill, they're going to be competing a lot for ceiling games throughout the season. So I don't love the idea of double stacking them at their prices, $6,400 and $6,800. I'd rather choose one, hope that guy has a ceiling game, and then Chase Edmonds comes through just with the overall touchdown equity and the high value touches that he's going to get in this offense.
Adam, how do you feel about that build? And I guess the question to both of you, if you're going to run a Dolphin stack there with 3 Miami players, do you need a run back from that New England offense, or are you okay just running the Dolphins?
Yeah, I don't think you need one. I'm not crazy about stacking, but I do like Tyreek Hill or Waddle as one-offs because not that really anybody in the league can keep up with Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle anyway. But the Patriots, like Jalen Mills, 4.6 speed, Terrence Mitchell, Jonathan Jones, they're all like 4.6, 4.65 speed in terms of 40 time. Like, they're not going to be able to keep up. And the Patriots play a lot of man coverage. Like, I don't know how it's going to work out for them against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So, as potential one-offs, I would lean Tyreek Hill. But stack-wise, like, this game's going to be pretty slow. Like, New England plays slow. I think the weather might not be great in that game either. And I just don't have interest in anybody on the Patriots. Like, if there's one team I'm not even looking at a single player on the slate for DFS, it's probably the Patriots.
Another team we haven't talked a ton about yet, Houston Texans there. Davis Mills, Brandon Cooks. Adam, I know you had a lot of love for Brevin Jordan, especially when we were doing some of those best ball drafts over the last month or two. Pharaoh Brown, I think, apparently going to get the start. They like him as a blocker. I was going to say,
he can block all he wants as long as Brevin's on the routes.
So I guess, how do you feel about getting to some of these Texans, especially like Ben says, Davis Mills and Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, so the Colts have been a team that play a ton of zone defense under Matt Eberflus. He's now with the Bears, but now they bring in Gus Bradley, who's pretty much run cover 3 as much as anybody. So the overall philosophy is going to be the same. The Colts have been a defense that limits deep passes. So I don't know if there's a huge ceiling for Davis Mills on top of already not having a huge ceiling. So I'm not really too high. Like, if I had to choose anybody from that offense, it might be Brevin Jordan because they give you the middle of the field. That's where Brevin Jordan is going to operate. But overall, like, the Texans, I think there's better matchups. Like, Cooks is going to see a decent amount of Stephon Gilmore, who he's on the wrong side of 30, so it's a matchup he can still win, and it's not going to be an exclusive shadow situation. But I just, again, I would rather play Jameis. I'd rather play Trevor Lawrence at that, mid to low 5K range.
Anything to add there, Alex?
No, total agreement.
So as we jump into wide receivers here, our good buddy, Stefano Vaccarino, jumping in the chat here, says he ranks.
Imagine not watching the best quarterback in the NFL yesterday and then typing this in the chat.
And he's got 2 Jets quarterbacks on top there in the AFC East. I don't think. I don't.
You got to
think
make
it's
up
any...
some storyline when the Nets are in shambles, right?
Yeah, maybe the arrow for Stefano's teams pointing down at the moment. We'll see Zach Wilson back no earlier than week 4. Week 4, taking on my Steelers. I guess jumping in here to wide receivers.
I've got a question real quick, actually.
Sure.
Is there a phrase that has gone from funny and fun to totally overused faster than that dog in him?
Yeah, or the meme of just like a rib cage with a picture of a dog.
It's funny because the Bills social media team did the thing you're exactly talking about, Zach, of Josh Allen this morning. It was the same meme, but yeah, it's gotten a little much.
So I'll throw this to you, Kylie, asking us more of like a fantasy season long question. Adam, do you think that Isaiah McKenzie is worth a pickup going forward? Obviously, we don't know the size of the league, how deep your rosters are, but you're Mr. Bills. So let me know what you thought about Isaiah McKenzie last night and going forward.
Yeah, he definitely didn't have the full-time slot role that it appeared he would have. Jamison Crowder played a lot. Like McKenzie's definitely worth adding to your roster. I wouldn't start him over Allen Robinson yet. Like Robinson still played like every snap. He ran a route on pretty much every drop back. And like it was just a bad spot. Like the Bills got pressure on Stafford, and I think Robinson. Like I don't think we can. It was frustrating, but I think Robinson will be fine. Maybe he won't be as good as I thought he would be. But the Rams clearly look at their offense like they need more than just Cooper Kupp, or they're going to be like Alex kind of talked about, pretty easy to defend. Like cool, Cooper Kupp can have 13 catches for 120 yards and a score, but nobody else is doing anything. You're not going to win. So. I'm still holding faith in Robinson, but I do think McKenzie's worth a pickup.
Yeah, I mean, you can never, as hard as it is, we can never overreact to one week.
Robert Woods was bad the first 5 weeks last season. Sean McVay said they have to get him more involved, and he had a squeaky wheel game. He ended up being like the wide receiver 15 in fantasy before he tore his ACL. So there's still a path to Robinson being a top 20 receiver. I'm not panicking like a lot of other people are on Robinson.
So jumping into wide receivers here, Alex, I want to start with you. I know we've got some guys in the mid-range, pretty much at every position, but wide receiver is not exempt from that. These mid-range guys in terms of price who are just projected through the roof in terms of ownership. And we'll get to those guys, but if you're going to spend up on a wide receiver, maybe harken back to some of the stacks you talked about, but we've got 2 Chargers up there and Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, those Dolphins receivers. Obviously, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, your Deebo Samuels, those huge fantasy names priced up at the top. Who sticks out to you if you're spending the big bucks at wide receiver?
Chase is definitely the first one, and Justin Jefferson is the second one. And you mentioned like the correlation with stacks. Both of them are also in the same game as teams I do like, whether it's Trubisky or Aaron Jones. You're getting some correlation there, so I do like that as well. But those would be my 2 favorites up here regardless, so that just makes it an easy call.
Adam, how about you up here at the top of wide receiver?
Did you guys hear me cough?
No. I did not. That was a beautiful mute by you. So.
That's what I was worried about because I've been bad.
I know a thing or two about mutes, Adam.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
or you do, but you don't, right? Like about it, but you don't know how it transpires. The high end's interesting because Alex, you can let me know if you disagree. I think paying up for receiver is going to be pretty contrarian on this slate. Like going all the way up to like getting 2 of like the 8K or mid 7K receivers. I don't know if a lot of people do that. Matchup wise, Jefferson, it looks bad, but Jair didn't really shadow when he was active last season to like the full extent. And this Jefferson role is going to be so good for fantasy. So I always have interest in Jefferson. Chase definitely stands out. Like again, Jamar Chase is probably $1,000 too cheap right now, honestly, like given what we saw from last season. So I like he could be playing anybody and I would have interest in Chase. And like the Steelers secondary, Zach, like I like Levi Wallace. I like Ahkello Witherspoon. I don't like them as your first and second corners on the team.
I know. Neither do I. So.
Yeah. And having said that, like I like T. Higgins as well against Levi Wallace, who I know Levi Wallace pretty well. He's a very solid corner, but he's a little bit undersized. He gets called for a lot of pass interference penalties. But at the high end, yeah, it's pretty easily for me. And then, like, I wasn't really high on them that much because they are pretty large favorites. But with George Kittle unlikely to play, like Debo makes a lot more sense if you are going up to the high end range, especially if he still gets some of those carries inside the 5 or just overall right away. Maybe they don't immediately go away from giving him carries. So with Kittle being out, like you worried, okay, maybe if Kittle's in and San Francisco's a huge favorite, are they going to throw enough to where Kittle, Ayuk, and Debo all get there? But with Kittle most likely out, you feel a lot better about it.
Agree. I also do agree with your point that wide receivers won't be paid up for as often. I think people are going to pay up far more often for McCaffrey, for Jonathan Taylor, even like the Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris range are going to get a lot. So I have Jefferson and Chase being the two most popular. Both are only around 15% in this upper range. Far more guys are going to go down to Michael Pittman at 44% in single entries. Marquise Brown might end up pushing 30 now.
I don't know what to do with Pittman, by the way.
Yeah.
Part of me wants to fade because, like, it's very possible the Colts just throw 26 times and Michael Pittman has, like, 6 for 70, and that's fine. But, like, he's going to be that popular. Like, I struggle with Pittman. Like, it's just he's such a good play in general, though, so it's tough. Like, I don't know what happened to where he was 5-5 coming out. Like, just it'd be different if he had a bad season last year and it was like, okay, he's 5-5 on week 1, but he was great last season. It's just weird.
Yeah, I'll push back on that a little. I actually do think he's worth the ownership just because, again, mid-tier wide receiver truck is the best truck, so I don't mind eating it. I don't really care how high it gets. But also, we're talking about a guy who, like, in best balls and season long, he was drafted around the 2-3 turn. He starts with this phenomenal matchup with Houston. $5,500 is way too cheap. I also think, like, one of the aspects that's been a little bit under discussed in regards to him is the red zone rushing rate for Indianapolis was massive last year, and it, of course, will still be high. They've got a strong line. They've got Jonathan Taylor. But part of that, too, was because they just had no trust in Carson Wentz down there. They will trust Matt Ryan to throw more in the red zone. So I think that his red zone role will also really improve this season.
And I think he'll see some Derek Stingley, which I'm not worried about anyway, but he's mostly going to see Steven Nelson. Steven Nelson's 5'10", 197. Michael Pittman's 6'4", 223. And he's one of the best contested catch receivers in the NFL. I will say, keep an eye on the touchdowns, because if this is another season where Matt Ryan's number one pass catcher doesn't score touchdowns, it's a Matt Ryan thing, right? Like Kyle Pitts, Julio, Calvin Ridley. Like, I'm just saying.
Hopefully that stayed in Atlanta, right? Hopefully he left that behind.
It's the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah. Before we finish up wide receiver, we are free today. Again, this will be the only week that NFL Live is in front of the paywall. You like what you see here? You want to get behind the paywall for all the awesome content that we have here at FTN Daily. You can sign up, get 20% off any package here at FTN Daily or at the FTN Network as a whole with the promo code FTNTV. It's all one word. Gets you that 20% discount, and it gets you access to all of that paywalled content, including our Sunday stream with Vlad, Two Gun, and Sam this Sunday. You don't want to miss that, especially if you're playing DFS here in week 1. Again, free stream. So we've got some of our friends in here, Nathaniel, asking, again, some of these more season-long questions, but I think it's worth bringing up here. Alex, this one I'll throw to you. Would you start A.J. Dillon or Elijah Mitchell here in week 1?
I would go Mitchell, and they are really close in price on DFS, so it can be a DFS question as well. But I'd go Mitchell.
I agree.
Okay.
Mitchell's splits as a favorite are pretty. Like, I think Kevin Adams was pointing it out the other day. Like, they're really, really good, and this is a spot you want to start Elijah Mitchell, right? Where you don't have to worry about. You would at least think you don't have to worry about them falling behind. And he had a lot of injuries last season, but right now he's healthy. So yeah, I like Dillon a lot. I'm probably starting Dillon most weeks if I have him as a flex, but Elijah Mitchell I think gets 20 carries in this game.
Well, and if that got the Magic Sports Guy stamp of approval, I think, again, we can sweep it. Elijah Mitchell, the choice there. Little three-way here, flex question from Aiden, who is just an absolute unit, apparently. Darnell Mooney, A.J. Dillon also in this question, or Damian Pierce at flex. Adam, what those three, who sticks out?
This is where I'm probably going to go Dillon.
Okay. Oh, why would you go there? I mean, Dillon in a committee. Damian Pierce, I know he's on a pretty crappy team, at least on paper, but he's getting the start for the Texans. What's the reasoning there?
It's like Leonard's out. It's not a great matchup. The Colts have a good D-line with DeForest Buckner. And I just think Dillon, we saw a sample of him when he became more involved down the stretch last season when Jones was healthy. He was still averaging like 15, 16 fantasy points per game and getting the clear goal line work. And, like, we all talk about the splits for Aaron Jones, but, like, what if Dillon just catches 50 balls this year? They both do, 50-plus. So I like Mooney in the volume, but the matchup's not good. I just think Dillon projects for, like, 17, 18 touches and probably has the best chance of scoring a touchdown out of any of these three players.
How do you feel about that, Alex?
If this is a season-long question, I'm in agreement. If it's DFS, I would actually side to Mooney because I think a good game for Dillon or Pierce looks like 15 DraftKings points. A good one for Mooney could be 25 to 30.
Yeah, I'm actually not on Dillon in DFS really, but yeah, if this is season-long, like Dillon.
Anything from the wide receiver category that we left out that you guys want to touch on, Alex? We'll start with you.
Not really. I think we covered it pretty well.
Play MVS.
Yeah. So actually, I did want to mention this. I like that call a lot. MVS reminds me of one of my favorite plays last year, which was Deshaun Jackson, and it's a similar argument. The argument is less about MVS himself, and it's more about what happens for the quarterback in the stack. And, you know, we talked about the competition at quarterback this week. There's so much at the top. So how is Mahomes going to separate? A good answer, like a good path for him to be able to separate from these other guys is if he throws one or two really long touchdowns. That's most likely to be MVS. Just like last season, whether it was Derek Carr or Matt Stafford, their path to a ceiling, particularly because they had no rushing upside, was a really long, explosive pass play to Deshaun Jackson. It only happened twice on Thanksgiving and early in the season on the Rams, but both times it did, that quarterback-wide receiver pairing was optimal. That's the type of thing that we could see for MVS this season as well. So I like that call quite a bit. The only thing I'd say is if you're using MVS, you damn well need to be using Mahomes too.
Yeah, no question. Before we get into tight ends and kind of wind down here for the week one edition of NFL Live, Ben asking any DJ Moore, Baker Mayfield interest as a stack? Alex shaking his head no. Adam, how do you feel?
Love DJ Moore. Don't love him here. Not going to see shadow coverage from Denzel Ward, but Denzel Ward's a really good corner. I worry about Carolina's pass protection in this game. Like, they upgrade a little bit of offensive line. They have Ike Ekwonu there, but he's got Myles Garrett in his first career start. That's pretty terrifying. So just not the slate. Again, it's a slate where it's I keep bringing it up, but week one, like the price, you just play whoever you want. So to prioritize, Baker Mayfield and DJ Moore just doesn't seem optimal.
Yeah, certainly an upgrade there for the Panthers skill
100%.
Position players with Baker, but it's not a priority, I think, for us here in week one. Looking at tight end, obviously, Mark Andrews, outstanding season last year. Travis Kelce, going to be Travis Kelce. George Kittle, about $1,000 cheaper than those two on DraftKings, and he's questionable now with the injury he picked up midweek. I think if you guys asked me, I think I'm leaning towards him sitting out. So, again, less options here at tight end. Hawkinson, Waller, Pitts, in addition to those top two. Adam, who are you looking at tight end?
I mean, it's pretty hard not to just play Kelce or Andrews because they're underpriced, especially Kelce, especially when you love Mahomes in that matchup.
Well, and everything else is so cheap, right? You can afford the expensive tight ends.
Yeah. I don't hate Hawkinson. The Eagles were terrible against tight ends last season, but they did upgrade at linebacker with Kaiser White. He's really good in coverage. They have an upgraded safety, in my opinion. We've seen safeties guard tight ends a lot, and now they have Gardner Johnson. So I don't know if the matchup's as good as it was last season, but I don't hate Hawkinson at that price. If I'm going 3K and below, or under 4K, the matchup is not great. The offense should be great, but I love the involvement that we should see from David Njoku at 3,900.
Yep.
And then the same goes for Cole Kmet. Like, don't love the matchup, but again, the involvement, the targets, the routes, like that's all I care about if I'm going down here at tight end. I don't know. I mean, we'll see if Zach Ertz plays. If he's out, you could get to obviously Trey McBride at 3K or 2,900. He'd be viable, but my tight end player pool isn't huge on this slate just because like it rarely is in the first place, but it's also just so much easier on the slate to get to Kelce or Andrews or whoever. I would have a little bit more interest in Kyle Pitts if Tyrann Matthews ruled out for the Saints, by the way.
Sure. Alex, how are you looking at tight end this week? Obviously, those two guys up top, I think we can skip over. Fine plays, right? But like, how do you break down the rest of the position?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that research found last year was that we're actually really good at picking tight ends, and so tight end chalk is far more valuable than what at least I previously thought. Like I was under the impression that tight ends were so variant that we didn't want to eat chalk at the position. We actually kind of do. So I'm very much on board with Kelsey, but my favorite tight end is Darren Waller here. I made the point earlier, the effect that I think Devontae Adams is going to have for Waller. And so I'm sort of saying, you know what, if throughout this season I expect Waller to be more in this Kelsey Andrews price range, then I should be taking advantage when he's 5,400, under 10% owned, and in a matchup with a team that does so well to really boost opponent play production. So the volume should be there for Waller. I think the efficiency will really take a step forward with Adams drawing so much attention away from him. Waller's been treated as a wide receiver 1 for the last 2 years by opponent coverages. They're not going to be able to do that this year. So I think we're going to see a boom from him efficiency wise. And I think that Waller Adams is basically going to be like the new Kelsey Hill, in which case he's not going to be 5,400 for very long. He'll be 65 to 7 before we know it.
Yeah, he saw bracket coverage all the time last season, which was a huge reason why Renfro had a breakout season. Mm-hmm. I had one more player I skipped on. Dallas Goedert's too cheap at 4,500. I don't know why he's cheaper than Mike Gesicki, who, by the way, you should not play. But, like, the only thing I want to see from Goddard is more usage in the red zone. I think he only had 2 end zone targets last season. But, like, the Eagles have one of the highest implied totals of the slate. The Lions defense is not good. I just think Goddard's a little bit too cheap. Like, I think he should be definitely ahead of Gesicki, probably ahead of Hockenson as well. He should probably be the tight end 5 on the slate behind, or 6 on the slate behind Andrews, Kelsey, Kittle, Pitts, and Waller.
Yeah, I do not disagree with you there. And a guy I would throw into my MME builds, Cole Kmet, 3,700. Yeah. He's going to catch a touchdown at some point, right, fellas? Obviously, we still have to mess with DSTs here.
What if Cole Kmet and Miles Sanders don't score again all year?
We shouldn't be shocked.
Then we're gonna have to do some sort of witchcraft or wizardry up there to break the curse that's in the end zone for those two.
And then Jacoby Myers scores 12 touchdowns the same season. This bizarro world.
Before we get out of here, only a couple more minutes. Defenses, each of you guys, give me 3 that you would be fine to roster here in week 1. Adam, we'll start with you.
I won't steal Alex's thunder because I know there's a mid-range defense he likes, mid-range to value. If I'm full on punting defense, like I'm okay with the Giants. I'd feel better about it if Kayvon Thibodeau is active. But like I don't think the Titans are going to come out and score like 30 points. And Titans' offensive line was really bad last season, so I wouldn't hate the Giants if I'm flat out punting. Otherwise, obviously, San Francisco makes a lot of sense, and it's easier to get to them on this slate than it will be to others. The Bears' offensive line is obviously an absolute disaster. Yeah. And if I'm looking kind of in the mid-range, the Dolphins, 2,600. Like the Patriots' offense has looked awful this offseason. Their offensive line's still a strength, but it's not as good. And Mac Jones doesn't really worry you about going out and scoring 30. And I think even though they don't have Byron Jones, they still have good corners. And I think at that price they can do plenty at 2,600.
Alex, your defenses?
I only have 2 that I'm looking at. I loved the point that Adam made earlier about Myles Garrett and Baker Mayfield in this offensive line. So I'll throw out a really, really contrarian running back defense pairing in Chubb and the Browns. I think that the running back defense pairing correlation really has somewhat gone out the window over the last couple of years just because running backs are now, it's so much more important that they have this receiving role, which makes a lot of them less game script dependent. But Chubb still is the correlation between this pairing is still absolutely there. So I like that as an expensive pairing, but a really, really contrarian one nonetheless. But the defense that I'm probably going to be using is Jacksonville. I'm looking at my single entry ownership projections, and I see Washington at like 26% and Jacksonville at around 3%. Antonio Gibson might end up being a very popular pay down option at running back. So I'm just going to flip that without question. I love the Jags here. Wentz is a nightmare, and he's the perfect type of quarterback that we want to attack. He's going to be throwing the ball, and he takes way too many unnecessary risks and also takes way too many sacks. I like the chances that this Jacksonville pass rush is far improved this year, which could make their defense far improved. We just don't, there's a lot we don't know about week 1. And so Washington being chalk and Jacksonville being like extremely contrarian, I think is just a major inefficiency.
I'm also like kind of joking, but also not. You mentioned the correlation of Gibson being popular, but then nobody's going to play Jacksonville's defense. If he fumbles again, he's getting benched.
I love that. Yeah.
Like in all seriousness, like he's 6 fumbles last year, fumbled in the preseason, was going to lose the starting job. Like if he fumbles again, you get that for Jacksonville, and then Gibson might not see the field again.
Oh, God, I hope not.
I'm just saying, like,
yeah, you're not wrong, and I love the Jacksonville call. I mean, Carson Wentz. Jacksonville hasn't been a friendly place for him over the last 8 to 9 months. That's our time, everybody. Again, we appreciate you tuning in to this free edition of NFL Live. We'll be going behind the paywall the rest of the season, but we'll be here every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, breaking down the slate for you. Again, you can join, you can sign up to FTN Daily, FTN Bets, any of the sites here in the FTN Network. Use the promo code FTNTV. It's all one word. It gets you 20% off any package here at FTN. Get in that Discord. Hey, when you do, get in that NFL channel. Tag myself, Alex, Adam. We would love to have you know when you join us. Free prize picks, edge tool, ftndaily.com, free DFS pick tracker. So all kinds of stuff going on, both free and behind the paywall. We got to get out of here. Betting show coming up. So don't go anywhere. Just flip over to that stream here on the FTN Network YouTube channel. Those guys breaking everything down from a sports betting perspective heading into Sunday of week 1. Appreciate you two guys for joining me. We'll be back next week. So for Alex, for Adam, I'm Zach, Weisenberg DFS on Twitter. See you guys next week. Goodbye.